We're starting. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Broker Talk, your weekly real estate show that reveals the inner workings of the residential real estate process. Today, we cover the BS of the real estate TV shows, how to get your property information in an affordable way before you buy, and a little bit about Mass Save and programs across the country that can give you a free consultation about how to make your home more energy efficient. I'm Larry Lawfer, your host each week, joined by Jim Lowenstern, the CEO of Castles Unlimited. Buying and selling a home seems simple, and it is. Find a buyer willing to pay for the purchase and you're done. It becomes far more complicated when you want to do it right. The right way is to understand the property, meaning the structure, the infrastructure, and the systems. Before you get there, you need to understand banks and lending so that you get yourself the right mortgage. What is an inspection? What is an appraisal? And do I need them? Buying and selling the right way, where the principal, meaning you, the buyer or the seller, gets what they want and need, is always best served when you work with a professional. Tom Timko of Beech Design is an architect with a civil engineering background and one of the principal creators of Mass Save, the program I just referenced. It is free and you'll learn how to save money. Tom, welcome to the show. I was fascinated by you sharing with me about supplying buyers with an audit of their program, which is different than an inspection or an appraisal. Can you elaborate on what that is? I think you called it an architectural assessment.
Sure. And I just wanted to touch on one little quick thing on when you say I'm principal creator of Mass Save, there were a lot of people involved in that. And it was a long time ago. So, but it is
It's a
one of the,
great program.
it's one of the proudest achievements I've ever had. So,
Yeah,
and it's helped a lot of people.
it
But to
has.
your point, getting to your point, Larry, this is a strange time in the real estate market. And one of the things that um, as I started getting asked probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, to be involved in the purchase and selection and that the whole process with clients who were looking at buying a piece of real estate. This came from one or two realtors I know, and they were getting questions from their clients like, how can we expand this house? What can we do? Part of the situation is that given the dearth of housing properties out there to purchase, you're expanding your search into things that may need a lot more work than you would have originally looked at. So understanding what that would take is not something that is really in the domain of a broker or a home inspector or someone like that. So I started getting pulled into those kinds of situations and helping people imagine what the property would look like if they kind of build out their dreams.
Let
That
me
in
let
the
me,
last,
let me describe that,
right.
Tom, in the way that it's just a little bit simpler.
Mhm.
If you're buying a property and you're planning on rehabbing the property, not just moving into it, because so much of the market is move-in ready, but if you're planning to rehab it or if you're planning to expand it in some way, then in that case, an architectural assessment is a great idea, even before the inspection. That's what you're saying. And
Right.
as I understand it, it's not as expensive. It doesn't take as long. It's not a formal process where you speak to the people and say, yes, we can take this 1,800 square foot ranch here in Dedham and we can make a 3,200 McMansion for you.
Right. Right, exactly. Yeah. So sometimes it was just uh, individuals who contact me in advance, but most often it was with two or three different real estate brokers at the time. Now, what that evolved into really over the last year in the superheated market was with the uh, with the rapid turnaround and turnover of properties, there wasn't time or inclination or desire to go through the full contingency process with a full home inspection and all of the other pieces that would go with that in a normal market. So, people would be going into a house, looking at it, knowing that there would be offers due in 5 hours or something like that, and then the listing broker will be getting 20 different offers. They would immediately throw out the ones with contingencies and go to the cash buyers and other people like that. So what a number of clients asked me to do was to come in and give them kind of a visual once over, no written documentation, nothing that's part of a contingency, but to give them a good heads up, identify any red flags, and then give them a commentary on what future potential there might be in the for that particular property. And it was I was probably doing a couple of these a week for most of the late winter and early spring. So I think there's a real demand there for that kind of service, especially when you were going into a no contingency situation. Now, I could project that and say that this is a useful thing for anybody, not just no contingency or anything like that, because there's Larry, as you mentioned, there's a lot of properties that are move-in ready, but there's an awful lot that are not. And how do you approach that as a home buyer? I mean, you might be able to imagine a new family room, but you have no clue about the zoning constraints, the different inspectional service problems and things like that you might run into. It's a much more complicated market these days.
So what sort of things were you suggesting to some of these buyers, Tom?
At the basic level, I would say that I would let them know if I saw any problem with the property, a structural issue, maintenance issue, rot, water, anything like that. And most of the time, I didn't see that. Now, I also wasn't looking at things like at the level of detail that a home inspector was looking. I was looking at the stuff that would cost real money for someone if they were moving into a property. Is this system going to fail? Is the heating system going to make it through the next winter? Stuff like that. So it was at that level, but in almost every case, these properties that we were looking at were the buyers or the potential buyers were going in knowing that they were going to have to put a couple $100,000 into the property to bring it up to what they wanted.
And wanting to. And
right.
wanting to.
And we're willing to do that. And this was not just the 40-year-old split level in Dedham. These were some of these were $3.5 million properties on the river in Wellesley, things like that, which are only 3 or 4 years old. But there's no guarantee that new construction is not going to have issues as well. So it crosses a lot of boundaries. I wouldn't say that there wasn't a formula to it because every house is different, but it was saw a lot of interesting things, and a number of these led to successful purchases.
There are a lot of issues facing people who are doing reconstruction rehab. One of them, and one of the main ones, is the supply that's available, the wood, the manufactured kinds of things. We'll be right back after this ad to talk about all of that. Stay tuned.
When you are searching for a new home, you want to be working with a realtor with years of experience, a professional with intimate knowledge of the communities that you are considering moving to, and someone who really wants to represent you as a buyer in what is probably the largest investment you will ever make in your lifetime. The realtors at Castles Unlimited want to be your choice when you are ready to make your next move. Please visit us at castlesunlimited.com or call us anytime at 800-967-3561. The realtors at Castles Unlimited are here to help your next purchase, lease, or sale of any real estate the easiest decision you've ever made. Start your search anytime.
Hey folks, we're back, and it's not a shortage of wood, it's the cost of wood, the shortage of money for the cost of the wood. How is that supply side making it difficult for rehabs and things like that, Tom?
It's been, the only way I can describe it, this is one of the strangest periods I've ever seen in 30 years of doing this. I would say probably the peak of the pain was in the April to June period. That was when lumber prices were at their maximum. They've receded a little bit, down from 300% of what they were a year and a half ago to 200% of what they were, roughly. We don't seem to be having a supply issue so much with wood. Back in April, we couldn't get 2x6s. You couldn't get sheets of plywood. You were waiting weeks to get stuff like that. So it's been a lot of this has to do with the pandemic. With wood, it has more to do with the tariffs and the border closures and things like that, because the balance of our wood here in the Northeast comes from Canada. And that really slowed down over that time frame. It didn't go away, but what it has done is it's changed the dynamic where we need to really go through every plan now and value engineer with the materials. So are we using regular 2x10s? Are we using structural engineered lumber instead? Because there's different on a daily basis. It's different. The lumber yards where you used to get a quote from the lumber yard as a builder, and they'd hold the number for 30 to 60 days. They were holding those quotes for 3 days. So
do you see much with metal houses?
I see it in the structural metal that we deal with, structural steel, which mostly comes from Japan and Korea. That really got expensive and difficult to get for a while. It's not.
No, I mean, do you see people designing houses with metal?
Oh, with metal? Nah, not that much. There's a little bit of a trend towards metal roofing, which you've probably seen. That really has nothing to do with the pandemic. That's just because that product has come down profoundly in price over the last 3 or 4 years. But
and it's a new trendy look.
It's also a new trendy look, yeah. But where that used to be 2 or 3 times the price of slate, it's now only maybe twice the price of asphalt shingles. So it's much better than it was. But metal, no, we don't generally use steel studs in buildings and things like that. And they were hard to get too, actually, during the peak. So there's not that much metal in residential construction. On the other hand, I'll qualify that in the sense that a lot of the connectors and materials we use to put the wood together with were in short supply as well for a while. You couldn't get stuff for your nail guns. You couldn't get the joist hangers and things like that for periods of time over, not so much now, but last fall especially, because a lot of that was coming in from China and a little bit from Japan. So that's gotten a lot better. The issue, if you're going to stay on the metal topic, the issue there now is appliances. And if you want to get appliances or windows, you're waiting 2 to 4 times what the normal wait time was.
6 months. Yeah. So do you have clients that have brought you in to do kind of an inspection, and you're talking about expansion of the property right then and there, doing the FAR calculations and sketches for them, and
right, or ballparking that. And obviously not without full measurements. You can't do things like that with precision. But I've been doing this long enough, and I know the different towns around here and the regulations within each town, that I can tell them up front with a little bit of research before I go in what they might be running into. The advantage of all of the towns now have fairly detailed information about each of the houses online. So if you can go into a town's website, look at their geographic information system, and you can see an awful lot about that particular house, whether it's going to meet the zoning constraints, whether it's going to run into a conservation issue, things like that. So everything like that is much, much more available than it used to be.
So what towns are easy to build in, and what towns are very difficult to build in?
Please be careful here. You have to work with these people.
The only people listening are just Larry and me. No one else will hear this.
Honestly, I would probably say that the building officials in the towns that I would say are tough would agree. Generally, the further away from Boston you get, the easier it gets to build. The more dense suburbs tend to have more regulations, more controls because they need them because of the density. Some towns are better organized that way than others. I mean, people talk about Newton being difficult to build in. Newton's actually not difficult to build in if you understand the rules and regulations. It's only when you try to go around those or break them that it becomes difficult. But if you know what you're looking at up front, then it's not that easy. It's not that hard to go through the process with a in a straightforward way. And that's true for most of the towns. One of the interesting things with the pandemic is it pushed a lot of towns into online permitting and online support of a lot of stuff. And that was, a lot of the towns were on the cusp of that before the pandemic hit. They had to jump into that both feet over a period of 2 or 3 months. So there was a bit of disruption there when all the towns were closed. You couldn't even get into the town halls for a while. Yeah. So we're sorting that out a little bit, but it's not a big detriment, honestly. And it's actually, in the end, it'll be better because most of
you bring up something that I didn't even think about, but now that we're living in sort of like a new kind of reality where, okay, so we have a novel virus. Will this be the last one? Probably not. And now we're all aware of how disruptive this can be to our lives and businesses. Are people putting new kinds of air filtration systems into the HVAC that's going into the properties? You see that?
The answer to that is a little bit complicated.
Or should they be doing it if they're not? That's the other question.
I mean, high level air filtration has been available for years. And I've done homes for people with allergies where we put in HEPA filtered systems and things like that. So the technology's been there. I know a number of people who put in standalone air filtration systems, not necessarily like at an HVAC level, but it was a standalone unit which filtered the air. That is actually not uncommon. And if you look at the marketplace for those, they're selling like hotcakes right now. I would think that, well, let me approach this from another way. As we do high-end HVAC today, with respect to energy savings and trying to reduce the energy load on these houses, one of the things that's happening is putting in air exchange systems into homes. Especially most of the bigger new homes will have this built in. Adding filtration of various sorts to that is not that difficult. The technology is already there for various other purposes. So I think that will become probably a lot more common. We do have a new energy code coming sometime in the state. And one of the things that's going to be happening is they're going to be asking us to tighten up everything, both new and existing construction. And part of that will be heat exchangers and air exchangers that go into systems.
I think that's all really good. Let's come back, and we have yet to talk about HGTV or Bravo or any of these. We'll be right back after this ad.
Hi, I'm Brian.
Hi, I'm Kaylee.
When we first met Larry, we were trying to move out of an apartment complex because we wanted more space in a single family home, and Larry really helped us get that rental going. And we lived there for a couple of years until our landlord decided that she wanted to sell her house.
Quickly.
Very quickly. So on very short notice, we had to find a new home, and Larry helped us buy this one. And he was with us every step of the way.
Every weekend throughout the craziest time to buy a home.
Right.
He's a busy guy, and it didn't seem as though we weren't his number one priority.
We went to like 10 different open houses back to back to back on every weekend, and Larry was with us on every single one.
We would recommend him. He's pretty great.
Hey, we're back with Tom Timko, the principal at Copper Beech Design, and of course, Jim Lowenstern. Hey, how many of you people watch HGTV? Do you actually believe that in an hour you can find a property, secure it, rehab it, and move into it in an hour? Probably not. I know Property Brothers are $1 million properties over on Bravo. That's kind of a guilty pleasure for people. Tom, what's your opinion of these shows?
Well, I kind of like Property Brothers the best, but um, uh, I think at a high level, I think these shows have actually been great because they've introduced a whole lot of knowledge to a marketplace which didn't know very much about this stuff. People understand, they've seen construction, they see these things, they have a much better understanding of what it really takes these days. On the other hand, they tend to set up a range of expectations which are unachievable. The time frames, for example. I mean, you go from you watch one of these shows, and between on either side of a commercial break, you've had probably 800 hours of construction time put into the property. So, and while I think people know that intellectually, that it's still, they expect things to happen quickly. Nothing happens quickly in the construction world. It's just we are still putting buildings together by hand, and it takes time. I think there's a lot to be learned from these shows, but you need to go into it knowing that every situation is different, and your situation is probably not going to be as easy and breezy as it looks like on TV.
But $1 million listing on Bravo, that's accurate.
I've never watched that one, so it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I would probably say that
every broker gets $30 million deals done in the course of two segments on an hour show.
Oh, it
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. That's available for like 15 people in the country,
Right.
maybe 40.
The most common question I get from clients after they've watched these shows is, "Hey, can you show me a walkthrough of the whole house in 3D when you come tomorrow?" What they don't understand is that those shows have slightly different production budgets than we do when we're designing these homes. And if I have 3 or 4 weeks and can outsource it to Shanghai, I can, and the $20,000 to pay for the walkthrough, then I can do that for them.
Let me help you, Tom. A couple of weeks ago, we had on our show a photographer, and he has an app who connects to his iPhone, and it does Matterport type
Right.
Designs.
Right.
It's about as accurate as the Matterport that's cost.
Mhm.
You're talking about a lot of expense, but
Yeah.
the
Well, and I'm talking about a different kind of result too.
You're talking about renderings.
Yeah, I'm talking about full scale renderings. Now, if I was doing, if it was a $10 million house, we would have built that into the budget, and we'd be doing it all the time. Yeah,
Right.
because that makes sense in that case.
Yeah, I had a race recently between renderings and the builder pretty much almost caught up to the renderings.
Yeah.
The guy, he was supposed to be able to turn it around in a week. It took him like a month.
Yeah.
And even then there were mistakes, and week after week.
The way to think about it is that you go to see your superhero movie, and those are all that CGI stuff is rendered basically using supercomputers networked around the world, and they're building a minute of video for about $2 million a minute. So it's not quite as simple and easy as it looks.
But at least we have a healthy market. So and other than the fact that it was good marketing, I really didn't even need to do it.
Yeah.
I was sold anyway.
And honestly,
before it was built.
I don't have to do 3D in most cases, because it doesn't, a lot of times it gets in the way because you can't render it well enough to represent it with quality. So it's easier to talk people through things and do detailed elevation sketches. There are tools that work really well. The kitchen design world has really good renderings now
What's the tipping point for most people between gutting, expanding, or just tearing down and starting fresh?
Or just rehabbing, leave some of the stuff and change some of the stuff.
Well, the real question is, when do you renovate? When do you tear down? Um,
Is it the ceiling height, the room size, or are we
Ceiling
talking?
height's a big issue, but it's uh, the other big component is uh, you can't you can't build a new house in Eastern Massachusetts for really under. I mean, you could probably build something really, really lean in the $400,000 range. But if you're looking in Newton, you're talking probably 750 to 850 entry point for new construction. Um, that, and if you're buying a property for 8 or 9 or 1.2 or something like that, that's a pretty big bump on the overall value of the property. So, can we make it, can we get people 90% of what they want with a renovation for 450,000 or 100% of what they want for 850,000? That's a pretty straightforward equation. But every case is different, obviously,
Right.
and
Right.
every budget is different.
Right. So, in the show, we've talked about a variety of different things. I mean, an inspection is, a trained professional who's licensed goes in and looks at all of your plugs and your toilets flush and things like that. An appraiser really has to determine value and has to really be able to, in a court of law, defend that. An architectural assessment is a different tool in the toolbox. I think our audience appreciates that kind of thing. The discussion about the supply side, I think that's easing up a little bit right now. I ordered a dryer for one of my properties last week, and it's going to be here on September 2nd. So that was a 3 week. You're still waiting, but bad taste. Let's talk about bad taste for a second. There's an incredible amount of bad taste, but bad taste is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? You know,
Um, uh, there's, as you know, there's a complete range of taste and perception of design out there. Um, in my world, um, there are times when you can suggest and impose a level of taste or design on a client's project. There are times where you just have to sit back and work with what they have. It really depends on the case, the situation. I tend to be, um, my job as an architect is to guide people and to tell them when they're thinking of making a good decision or a bad decision. That bad decision might be about, are you going to choose $1,000 square foot countertop or $100 square foot countertop? When they look the same, I can say to them, this is not a great decision. To a certain degree, I can convince people about taste, but people have their own ingrained, innate feelings of what they want to see. There's cultural elements to that. There's
sure.
age and historic elements to that. There's where you grew up, your background. All of those things factor in there. So
Sure.
there's no simple answer to that. But good God, there's still plenty of bad taste out there.
Hey, let's wrap this up about talking about Mass Save just for a little bit. Mass Save is a program, and in fact, all states have this kind of a program. It's funded usually by your energy companies, and the reason why it's good for them to fund this and this process and even help you purchase some new things is because they don't have to build new plants, and that we don't need more energy driven plants. So the Mass Save, the way it worked in my home and the way that I recommend it to people is they'll come in and they'll look at your windows, they'll look at your heating system, your HVAC if you have it, your hot water heater. I mentioned windows, doors. What else do they do, Tom? What am I missing?
Well, they do. They coordinate a lot of different programs as well. They have a zero interest loan program. I'm not sure what the total number is on that now, but it was
Oil to gas conversion.
Well, there's oil to gas conversion. There's also for insulation. I want to say it was like 25K at zero interest last year. It might have been higher than that. I just don't remember. They coordinate some of the tax break stuff and things like that. They're also involved with solar assessments and other elements. So they have a pretty broad spectrum of things that they look at. I mean, if you haven't had it done to your house, you should be on the phone getting them to come out and take a look.
It's free. Do it.
It's free, and you will learn a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
There's no question of the value there, and it's been very successful in Massachusetts. There's statistics out there on how much it's actually saved and how many power plants we haven't had to build because of it. I'm sure they're probably out on the web.
0 plants have been built here in Massachusetts.
Right. I'm sure the Mass Save website tells you all that stuff. But it's a no-brainer. We are required anytime we do construction now to effectively go through either what will be the equivalent of a Mass Save process before we can even get the building permit. I mean, we've got to show compliance with the state and the national energy codes. We've got to show a whole host of different things. New construction has a much higher level than existing construction. So this is ingrained. This is built into the process these days. And I'd be hard pressed to find an architect who doesn't kind of know it really pretty thoroughly.
Well, thanks, Tom, for that information. And like they say in the Car Talk show, you've wasted a perfectly good half hour. Thank you for listening to another episode of Broker Talk. Join us next week when we have a new guest who has new information to share with you. Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening, folks. Tune in next week.
Recording stopped.